Hello, this is Professor Teresa Pelkie. This is Session 3, Part 2, Using Column Aliases. In this short video, we'll look at an important technique that you need to be familiar with. This technique is referred to as a column alias. Simply put, a column alias allows you to assign a name to a column. Let's look at some examples. You'll see that defining and using a column alias is really easy. On this slide, you see a simple select statement. This select retrieves the code2 column from the world.country table. It retrieves the column twice. We'll get to the second retrieval in a minute. For now, look at the circled code2 in the select statement. Now look down at the result grid and you can see that code 2 is also the column heading for the first column. This is an example of retrieving a column in a select statement without using an alias. In this case, the column name that is defined in the table is the column heading in the result grid. Now let's look at the second retrieval of the code 2 column. In the second retrieval, you still see the column name, code 2, but this time, the column name is followed by a keyword and a value. The keyword is the as keyword. You can type in as using uppercase or lowercase letters. You need at least one space before and one space after the keyword. When the select statement is run, the as keyword is recognized as a keyword. The value of the keyword is the text literal short code. The text literal is enclosed in an opening single quote and a closing single quote. In the result grid, you can see that the value for the alias appears as the column heading for the second column. Even though we are retrieving code 2 from the table, we are displaying it as short code. As you can see in this example, you can mix columns that you retrieve. That is, if you need to use an alias for a column, you can use it. If you don't need an alias, you don't have to use it. To better understand the column alias technique, you can consider some of the problems that are solved by using a column alias. In some cases, you might need to work with tables that were defined in older applications, sometimes referred to as legacy applications. On some older systems, column name lengths were limited, sometimes as short as 6 characters. Although it would be tempting to create a new table definition with more descriptive column names, it is usually very difficult to change a table that is used by many applications. So rather than put up with the cryptic name or try to change the table, you can simply use an alias when you code a select statement. The alias is only in effect for your select. It does not change the column name in the underlying table. In addition to using an alias for cryptic or short names, you might want to use an alias to assign a name that is more meaningful for your application. This is especially useful if you are creating a select statement that will be directly used in a reporting application or if you are exporting data to an end-user application like Excel. Rather than display the column names that are in the table, you can provide names that will be easier for a user to understand. You can assign an alias to a literal column. You saw an example of that in the previous slide. For review, you'll see an example on the next slide. Finally, you'll see an important use of column aliases later in this course when we work with joined tables. The problem with joined tables is that the same column name might appear in more than one table. By using column aliases, you can clearly distinguish same name columns from each other. To wrap up, we'll look at another simple example. The select shown here is similar to what you saw in the previous video. In this example, the select invokes two functions, current date and current time. Those are not column names in a table. In fact, there is no from statement in this select, so there is no table. You can see that we are using an alias for both of the columns. There are two as keywords in the statement, so there is an alias for each function. You can see the column headings in the result grid followed by the values retrieved from the functions. Look carefully at the column alias for the first column, today's date. That literal contains an embedded single quote character. If you look at where the value is specified following the as keyword on the select statement, you'll see that the alias text today's date is enclosed in an opening and closing single quote character. Because we also want to have the embedded single quote, we have to type it in as 2 consecutive single quote characters. So following the letter Y in today, you type 2 single quote characters, then the S. Now at first glance, the 2 single quotes right next to each other look like a double quote character. And here's the thing, you can actually type a double quote there following the Y and before the S. But if you do type the double quote character, that is what will show up in the result grid. So the rule is, when you want an embedded single quote to show up, you type 2 single quotes right next to each other. In the next video, we'll look at some of the SQL functions that are commonly used with select statements.